Good morning, everybody. My name is Madison McHale. I'm one of the ISSS advisors. Um, so welcome this morning.
Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Steinfeld, Associate Director, Advising Services at ISSS. What we're going to do today, we are going to play the presentation of the webinar, and then Madison and I will be available after that to answer any questions that you may have.
Today we are going to do a workshop on optional practical training, also known as OPT. This workshop will focus primarily on post-completion OPT, so we'll be geared towards those graduating this fall as well as this spring. So for those of you who are looking to apply for OPT, there are certain basic information to be aware of. The first thing is that why is OPT granted to F-1 students? It is to apply the knowledge that you're learning in your major, in your classroom, to a practical work experience. So this is a benefit of your F-1 status. For regular OPT, there is 12 months given at each degree level. It can be done as pre-completion OPT, which is during your academic program, or post-completion OPT, which is something that is for after you graduate. ISSS is going to recommend you for OPT, but the actual application is authorized by the USCIS, and that's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So who is eligible? To eligible, you have to be in valid F-1 status at the time that you're applying and have completed at least one academic year in a lawful immigration status. Now, a common question is, do I need a job at the time I'm applying? With OPT, that is not necessary. So you can start the process with the timelines that we will review before you have been offered a job. So the types of OPT employment, again, during regular OPT, this is the first 12 months, or pre-completion OPT, the employment can be paid or unpaid. It is okay to be volunteering, and it has to be a legitimate unpaid work. So if you're not receiving a paycheck, the employer has to make sure they are giving you something that has been vetted to be a bona fide opportunity where it is not necessary to pay the employee. Students may hold multiple positions. So when you're on that pre-completion or post-completion OPT, that first 12 months, you can have multiple part-time jobs. You can switch jobs as long as it's all related to your major field of study and you're working at least 20 hours a week. The 20 hours a week is for that full-time post-completion OPT. So as long as you're accumulating up to that amount, you can be changing, starting one job, adding another. You have a lot of flexibility in that initial 12 months of post-completion OPT. Now, I mentioned work in the field of study, and employment is required that you are working and being able to show the connection between what you studied at Penn to what you're doing in your job. So this is a common discussion and question we get from students. The key thing is that you are looking at what are you doing in this position? Maybe not so much the company, it could be a manufacturing company, but you're doing the finance portion and your major's finance. You want to look at what you learned in your academic program. What does it prepare you to do? Do you feel comfortable explaining and justifying that relationship? ISSS can give you general guidance and what it may mean to be working directly related to your major field of study, but you have other resources. You can talk to your department, who've developed the curriculum, who administer the curriculum. You can talk to alumni. Career Services has these two good work sites that are also helpful, and they are also an excellent resource when you're looking for employment or looking to see how your employment will work as an F-1 student on OPT. So the application process, it's a multi-step process, and we will go into each of these as we move along. Okay. So what we've done is we've included a timeline, and this first slide is for our fall graduates. So fall graduation this year is December 21st. OPT allows you to apply up to 30 days before your graduation for your post-completion OPT. So the earliest OPT application date is September 22nd. So we are within the application window for anyone here who is a fall graduate. The latest that you may apply is up to 60 days after graduation, and that date is February 19th. So we may have some spring graduates who have joined us, or even those who are graduating later on. This gives you also an idea of the potential timing. So for our spring graduates, we are looking at May 20th, 2024. The earliest application will be February 20th, 2024, and the latest will be July 19th of next year. So one of the key things to note is that when you're applying for OPT, we will open up the process in the IPEN system no more than 95 days ahead of May 20th, but we will not release any I-20s until the 20th. Because what happens is if an application goes in too soon to USCIS, they will deny that application. So we want to protect that for you. So any applications you'll get at the earliest on February 20th for our spring grads. So the process itself. I mean, the key thing is you want to make sure, in addition to attending the workshop, is to make sure to read the OPT section on our website. There is going to be an OPT request e-form that is IPEN. The first step will be you'll complete that. It will go to your academic advisor for their approval. They confirm you've maintained, good academic standing, that you're graduating, if for our post-completion OPT applications. And then for those, you will have to pay, there is a pen processing fee that you'll go through that process, as well as a tutorial that you will complete that will allow you to complete the e-form request. So one thing to make sure to take note is that the processing time after your academic advisor gives their approval, ISSS needs about 3 to 5 business days to process. When we're looking at our very high peak times in spring, we do ask for a little more allowance. It could take closer to 5 to 7 days. We give you a new I-20 that is going to have the OPT recommendation. That will include the dates that you will select when you put together your e-form. So OPT is 4 specific dates, and that start date falls within 60 days of graduation. So, and it falls along the same lines as your grace period if you were to have one, if you weren't applying for OPT. So you're applying for OPT and you are going to pick a date that falls, for example, if it's December 19th, and the latest date you can apply is February 20th. Any day within there, between the 20th of December and the 20th of February, you will ask for your OPTs to start, and that will be up to 12 months for the end date. We will email you that I-20 for you to be able to print and sign and then upload as part of the next step, which is applying with USCIS. USCIS in recent years has implemented an online portal to apply for OPT, and we recommend that students use that online application versus the older method of mailing it into USCIS. So we do have instructions for filing the application form for the government, which is the I-765, after you've gotten the OPT I-20 from ISSS. You do need that for your application. When we give you that I-20, there is a 30-day window for which you need to apply on the online portal with USCIS. If you apply more than 30 days from when we issue the I-20, they will deny the application. So it's very important that you're not holding on to that before you move on to that next step. What I would encourage is that if you do take some time and you are applying later, To reach out to your ISSS advisor, we can easily issue a new recommendation to make sure that your I-20 is not outdated. Also is a link there for more information on filing online with USCIS. So this outlines some of the benefits to file online. All information is done that way, so you don't have to put together a packet, you don't have to mail it, incur that cost. You don't have to worry about getting a check or money order. You may do a credit or debit card online. And the system also alerts you if you're missing any information. So it does cut down on a lot of possible errors that could be made on the paper application. You also will be able to track your application online, and you will get a receipt number. The online portal, if you were to get a request for more evidence, there is a way to upload that to the online portal as well. So once you apply with USCIS, then you are waiting for them to adjudicate your application. That could be either an approval, a request for evidence, or even a denial, which is not a common thing, but just to keep in mind, as long as you follow these steps, you should avoid that, but it is a possibility with applications. But in most cases, we are going to see your application be approved if you apply via regular processing. It can average about 3 months. It does fluctuate. We see them go up and down in regards to how long it takes for applications to be processed. Recently, it's been closer to 3 to 4 months. Last spring, it was closer to 1 to 2 months. Will we see a shift? I'm not sure. But if you need the application to be adjudicated much sooner, they have implemented an option to pay for premium processing. It is an additional fee to USCIS of $1,500. They will promise to adjudicate in 30 days. Again, it doesn't guarantee an approval, but you will have a response within 30 days with the additional premium processing. You can also change it later on. So if you file normally and you want to get and it's taking longer than you anticipated, or then you need that approval sooner, you can opt to change to premium processing later on. Again, you'll receive that case number when you apply on your portal, and you'll be able to keep checking the status of your application. Key thing is to make sure that until you have your OPT and the approval date is current, you are not engaging in any employment, and that includes any orientation sessions, training that an employer may offer. If you do get a request for evidence that they want to have more information, there's something maybe wrong with your photo, your payment, it's a possibility. And you want to make sure you reach out to your ISSS advisor before you respond so we can make sure your response is accurate and complete. This just gives you an idea of what you're going to see when you get your card. It's the size of a driver's license, ID card. And you want to make sure all the information is correct as soon as you receive it. And if there is any errors or issues, reach out to ISSS. So again, when can you start working? So you want to make sure, one, your OPT has been approved, you have that card in hand, and the start date has been reached. So as of the start date that's listed on the card, that's when you may begin your employment. Now, while you're on OPT, you do continue to have OPT reporting requirements as we continue to be your F-1 sponsor during that time. So we are still here for you to answer questions as well as update information in your CBIS record. So you want to make sure that you're going into IPEN once you get your EAD and once you have your first employer. So if it's at the same time, if you already have your employer, you're doing all that reporting. If not, you want to make sure as soon as you get employment that you're reporting that information as well as any later changes. The OPT reporting e-form is where you update the OPT employment, as well as if you change your immigration status or decide to leave the US early and will not continue on OPT. Another requirement is that you're updating your address, your email, and your phone number. Your address in particular is a requirement to update, and these are all within 10 days. So these updates, whether it's employment, address, do have a 10-day window for you to report. There is that e-form, the address, email, phone e-form for you to do that through IPEN as well. You will also get an email from SEVP, the Student Exchange Visitor Program portal, around the time that your OPT is approved and will begin. You'll receive an email to set up that OPT approval. It's a method to view your information. If you ever get locked out, you can go into IPEN. You can click a SEV portal reset eForm in IPEN, but you always want to make sure you're doing all your updates via the IPEN system to make sure everything is updated accurately. The SEVP portal is another tool to see your information, but Penn wants you to make sure you're still giving us your updates as the best way to make sure everything is accurate as you continue as F1 OPT. Now, there is a period of time that you're allowed to be unemployed, but there is a limit to that. So over those first 12 months of OPT, you cannot go over 90 days where you do not have employment. So it is an aggregate of days. So if you take a month to get a job in the beginning, that job ends, and then you take another month, that time is coming out of those 90 days. But you do have a total of 90, and your F1 status, in order for it to remain valid, you can't go over and exceed 90 days. So you just want to make sure you're always reporting any employment that you have, and as of the start of the EAD, that you're looking at those options and making sure you have something where you're working at least those 20 hours a week in your field of study. And again, going back to the previous slides where employment, you can have multiple positions. So if you can't start that full-time job, you could have 2 or 3 part-time jobs, and they could even be bona fide volunteer positions. You may get notices from SEVP if you are getting close or you don't report the employment. And it is possible that they could terminate the record if the 90 days goes over. It's something that they have informed they may implement or may happen, but that is a possibility to keep in mind. So make sure you're in contact with us, especially if you're concerned that you may not be able to make that requirement. A very common discussion in questions is travel. And in certain cases, travel is not recommended or advised. So we are going to go over those specific travel scenarios, basically before graduation and after graduation. So before your program end date, travel is not as much of an issue. However, when you do apply for OPT, you want to make sure you're in the US when you're filing the application and know that it's been receipted. Once it's receipted, you can travel as you normally would as a student with your F1 documents. And this is, for example, before December 21st for our fall grads and before May 20th for our spring grads. Now, so a common question is, so fall break, spring break, that's okay. You can apply and travel during those times as long as you have the rest of the required documents as you have and would for as an F1 student. However, after the program end date, it's not recommended. So the possible risks of traveling at that time. If you need a new visa and you need to apply, without the EAD, you may not be able to do that. If your EAD is lost in the mail, you're not here to kind of do any of the footwork to try and locate it. Now, the biggest issue is if it's denied while you're abroad and you've left, you no longer have that connection to your F1 because your grace period is no longer something that's in place because you're outside the US and it's after graduation. So that is the most risky potential option of traveling while the OPT is pending and we are beyond the end of your program end date. There's also the possibility that USCIS inquiry and the deadline to respond to an RFE, being in the US, it may be an option that's much easier to do and keep track of. Travel is not prohibited while OPT is pending. However, you do need to make that decision, and we do advise to talk to us about your particular circumstances as needed. Travel restrictions, they can change, so you want to be aware of that. And ultimately, the officers at Customs and Border Protection make that decision for entry. So if you have any questions about travel, and if it's necessary for you to do so, feel free to reach out to us. But again, ultimately, you'll make that decision, but it's good to be aware of the risks. All right, so what if your OPT is approved? So one good thing is you have these normal documents. Again, valid passport. Your F-1 visa is valid to re-enter unless you're Canadian and don't need the visa. A big difference is we sign that I-20 every 6 months versus 12 months when you're on OPT. You want to have your EAD with you, and your proof of employment is something that's recommended, whether it's like your job offer letter or that you're continuing employment with someone. Also, it's good to make sure you're talking to your employer about any travel plans, especially if they're planning to apply for an H-1B, which is a temporary worker visa. So you would want to make sure you're consulting with them about your timing of your trip so that it does not conflict with that application. Now, I know a lot of people are wondering, when is she going to mention OPT STEM? So this is applicable to anyone who's in a STEM major, and which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. You are eligible to extend OPT for an additional 24 months. I encourage you to make sure to read our STEM website. And something to note, it's not part of this initial application. It's something that you are going to be doing before the end of your 12 months of OPT or whatever you have remaining if you did pre-completion. So it's 90 days before that OPT end date when you can apply. So the eligibility again is that you are in a STEM major. You do have to have a job where you're working in that STEM degree, and your employer has to be part of what's called E-Verify. They help you fill out what's called a I-983 training plan, but the actual application process is very similar to OPT, but there is some additional steps that are required in coordination with your employer. Once you are on STEM, you do have reporting requirements, and these are very important to be sure you're doing these in IPEN. Every 6 months, you're validating your employment and your address. At the 12-month mark, you're also doing a 12-month evaluation. The 24-month mark, you're doing a final evaluation and doing that final reporting. You also need to make sure you're always updating any employment and contact information as well as your address. And again, there's STEM OPT reporting e-forms and address updates all in IPEN. We continue to be your F-1 sponsor, and we continue to help you with this reporting requirements. Now, H-1B cap gap. This is something that is it's a little hard to explain on a slide, but just so you know, when your OPT is ending, there may be a possibility if your employer has applied for an H-1B for you to continue working on OPT until the effective H-1B date, which would be October 1st. So this is when there's a change of status. They're applying for you to go from F-1 to H-1B. You're accepted in the lottery that's associated with the H-1B authorization and application. And your OPT goes until at least April 1st. And then the employer is applying for an October 1st start date. The OPT is extended to September 30th. And this as long as your H-1B remains valid, it's not rejected, denied, or revoked. So frequently asked questions. My OPT is more than 30 days old. My OPT I-20 is more than 30 days old. May I use it to apply for OPT? Definite no. You want to make sure you're talking to your advisor in that scenario. USCIS will deny that application if you send it in more than 30 days from when we issued that I-20. So just reach out to us. We can easily fix that for you. Do I need my EAD before beginning work? Yes. You want to make sure, again, you have your EAD. It has the start date is current, and then you may begin work. Can I change my OPT request dates? This is also no. Once you apply with USCIS, those dates are firm. Your application's gone in. So you want to make sure when you're requesting those dates, starting with the e-form and IPEN, that you know the dates that you want to work or that you think may be the best option for you. So for example, you're finishing your program December 21st. You don't have a job and you're worried that you might not have a job for at least a couple months. The latest date you can pick is February 20th. That's fine. You can February 20th. It's just you're not going to be able to work any sooner than that if you find a job that wants you to start February 1. So you just need to think through that when you're requesting your dates, and you can consult with us as well if you have any questions. Can I cancel my OPT if I have not used it? Withdrawing your OPT before they adjudicate it is something that can be tried, but it's not guaranteed. Once they approve it, it's not possible to cancel it. So if you are approved for OPT, you've applied with the USCIS and you've been approved for OPT, that time will be counted. There's no way to take it back. So this is kind of a related question because I've already used 12 months of OPT in one program. Will I be eligible for another 12 months in another program? That is possible at each higher degree level. So if you're a bachelor's student, you will have 12 months of OPT that you're granted after your bachelor's. If you complete a master's in the US, you can apply for OPT again because it's a higher degree level. Same with master's to PhD. Now, let's say you finish your master's, you apply for OPT, it's granted, then you decide not to use it and you do another master's program. Again, since you can't cancel that first one, you're not going to have another period of OPT. So again, something to think through if you think you may do more than one master's program in the US. And what is my immigration status while on OPT? This is a common question. I've tried to kind of include this throughout that you are still F-1. This is a benefit of your F-1 status to have OPT. It's something initially and additionally given to you as F-1 students. And it is to apply, again, that work, what you learned in the classroom to that work experience. Some final thoughts, make sure to review our website, plan ahead, look at the dates. Anything that you submit online, keep an electronic copy, print, keep a physical copy. You just want to know what you submitted to them and always read our emails. We are going to let you know deadlines. We're going to let you know updates, important things to know. So whether or not you're applying for OPT right now or later, always read ISSS emails. Here's some important links. Make sure if you want to join our Facebook page, Instagram, these are ways to reach us. We have a newsletter that it's good to make sure if you haven't already to sign up for. So I encourage you to make sure to take advantage of all these options to be involved with ISSS and to learn more from ISSS. Thank you, everyone. We hope you share your feedback with us. And also, we will offer you a question and answer session after this presentation. We hope you will stay on and ask any questions of our ISSS team.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the great questions we've been getting so far. There's still a few that are listed, and if anyone has any questions, we will go through what's in the Q&A within the time that's allowed. So the first one is if we're expected to graduate December and apply for OPT right now, we also have travel planned before December 21st. Which I-20 do we need to use during the travel? The general I-20 or OPT I-20? You're going to want to use that OPT I-20. That's the latest one that's been issued to you. It's still good for travel as a current student. It just has that you've been recommended for OPT and will have the most up-to-date travel signature. So if we give you the OPT I-20, you apply for OPT, If you're seated by USCIS, you have travel after that before graduation, just use that most recent I-20.
So the next question is, do we need to maintain a U.S. address between graduation and the employment start date, given the 10-day address reporting requirement? I was planning on living at home between these two dates.
So if you are going to be at what, if you're not going to have, if let's say you're traveling and you've left your one address and you have no address in the US, and then you're coming back in to the new address, I would just suggest in that situation, leave the current one, but as soon as you're back, or go ahead and report the new one if it's within 10 days of when you're going to be living there. So it's kind of one of those things where if you don't have any address and you're not here, I would just say go ahead and report the new address as soon as you move there or within 10 days of that move. Do we renew our F-1 visa when we are on post-completion OPT? If so, what does the timeline look like? And can we do that application from the United States, or do we have to do it from our home country?
So to answer the first question, yes, you do still need to maintain your F-1 visa. OPT is a postgraduate benefit of the F-1 visa. So you're still going to be on F-1 visa status. So as similar as you've done before, when you are here in the United States and on OPT, if your F-1 visa does expire, it's similar to when you were a student, that if you are not planning to travel, anything like that, it's okay for it to expire while you're in the United States. But the next time that you are planning to travel outside the US, you will need to make arrangements and time to renew that visa again, as similarly as you would when you were a student. It's not an application that at this time is available to renew within the United States. It's still where you are needing to, go abroad to renew the visa, but you do not need to be, traveling abroad for the reason of doing that. Like I said, if you're in the United States and you are on OPT, and you do not have plans to travel at that time, it is fine if it is expired at that time. But if you do travel at the time that you are re-entering the United States, that F-1 visa does need to be valid in order to be able to enter the United States. If I use a OPT for a summer internship, will it still be going during the following semester? This following semester will have hour restrictions.
Okay. So this answer can very well depend on your program. So if I'm answering this question for a PhD student in dissertation, it's going to be very different for a student who is, let's say, in a master's or undergraduate program still pursuing classes. One thing I'd like to mention in regards to this is any OPT that you use during your program will be deducted from the total, like the initial 12 months, for example. If you still have coursework left, you could do full-time OPT during the university break, such as summer. But if you're looking to continue into the fall term, it would be a separate application to apply for part-time OPT. And part-time OPT does get deducted at a half rate from your 12 months. So if you work, let's say the fall, you apply for part-time pre-completion OPT for 4 months, that's 2 months out of the 12. But it is two completely separate applications. It is something to definitely look into your CPT eligibility, depending on your academic program. Also, if you are a doctoral student, you may potentially be able to do full-time OPT for a more extended period of time if you're in dissertation only, as an example.
Okay. Now, this
right.
next question, I can try to answer as well. It may be one where we're both chiming in on this.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and read it.
Yeah.
So if the application form, I put the start date of February 19th. So this is the scenario. However, it's delayed. I received the EAD card on May 3rd. During the time between February 19th and May 3rd, am I able to stay in the US? And does that mean my 12-month job term starts on May 3rd instead of February 19th, even if the start date is the February date.
So I'm going to start the first part in terms of if you can stay in the US. As long as you have filed your OPT application with USCIS and it was receipted by them, which means shortly after you submit your application, you will be issued a receipt notice by USCIS. And on that receipt notice, it will say like a received date. And that's where they officially, USCIS confirms that they date that they receive your application. As long as that date is dated prior to the end of your 60-day grace period, you are lawfully allowed to stay in the United States. You are properly maintaining your status. Even if it goes beyond your 60-day grace period and you still do not have a decision yet from USCIS. As long as the application is still pending, it's not considered unlawful stay in the United States. And so for the next part, Donna may have more experience with this than I do.
Sure.
I have been told at least that it can depend on what actually gets printed on the EAD card, which can sometimes be uncertain in terms of USCIS could print onto the card, even though it's been passed to that original start date. They may change it. I don't know if, Donna, you want to chime in a bit on that.
I would say from my experience, it's mostly been that if it's approved, let's say it's approved in May, it's going to have that date of approval. So it's going to have the May start date. So you can't start working until you have the EAD. So you want to make sure you have the EAD and knowing what date they've actually printed on the card. But in most cases, it'll be that approval date. Now, the end date, you may lose some time. You may lose some of your 12 months in that situation. USCIS will not give you a end date that falls more than 14 months from the end of your program. So the latest, so if you ask for February 19th, they don't approve it to May, you're probably still going to have a February like 18th end date on the EAD. They're not going to tack any time on the end.
All right. And I can, if you want to ask me the next question.
Okay. Does the timing of the end of OPT depend on when I get OPT? Are there any disadvantages to processing early?
So this first part may have gone a bit with the previous question.
Yeah.
But if you were to, like, let's say hypothetically it was done on time, in the sense that like it's processed ahead of the start date that you had requested. Typically, as Don had said before, if you had like a February 19th start date, then your end date would be February 18th. It doesn't go from like February 19th to 19th. It's usually a year from then, and then it kind of minus a day. And if, Donna, you want to add more to that, you can.
Yeah,
if not, I'll go to the next part of it.
Go ahead to the next part.
So in terms of disadvantages to or advantages to processing early, it really more depends on your circumstance specifically. I know that, for example, even though having a job is not a requirement in order to apply for OPT, we know that sometimes we see cases where students already have a position lined up and they have an expected start date that they want to aim for. So they may be, basing their decision on that and wanting to make sure that there is enough processing time that they can get their EAD card on time for that. Or someone just may choose a start date for different reasons. So it's more kind of your specific situation, because it's not something that, as advisors, we can choose a date for you. That's something that you do need to do on your own. But there are just certain factors that can play a role in personally what you decide. So if you want to add to that, Donna.
Yeah, and applying earlier versus later, in my experience and opinion, it does seem the earlier you apply, you can still pick that late start date. So you can apply now and still pick February 19th as your start date. And that seems to usually work out for the better. We see students who are applying at the earlier stages of a semester when they're allowed. It just seems to go more smoothly than later applications. So I always recommend, if you can apply early, it doesn't hurt. Maybe you're finalizing some dates with your employer and it's just going to put you off for a couple of weeks. That's okay. But I wouldn't hold on for too long. And especially if you do want to travel and you want to have that EAD before you leave. So it's always good, if you have travel plans, to apply in the earlier time. There's also a premium processing option now. That's something that's as of last spring. It wasn't an option before. So if you do apply later and you need to expedite that application, there is that additional fee, but it is an option that's out there that you can change your application to premium later on as well. I want my start date to be at the end of January, with the days between December 21st and the end of January be part of the 60 days of unemployment allowed.
So your unemployment begins at the start date of your OPT. So if you have a start date that's going to be at the end of January, but you don't have employment starting on that day, or you're not able to start working yet at that time, if, for example, you don't have the EAD card yet in your possession or something like that, that is when it would begin. During your, and I presume that you're referring to your 60-day grace period, if you have a graduation date of December 21st, that 60-day grace period is not part of your unemployment if your start date is not within that time period, because the earliest start date that you are eligible to have and choose for OPT is the day after your program end date. So if you were to choose, though, a start date, within that, it would, again, the unemployment, the 90 days allotted of unemployment calculator would begin on that OPT start date that will eventually be printed on your EAD card. Okay. It's okay if I ask you this one, Donna?
Yeah.
If we are a dual degree student, which academic advisor approves the OPT form? Is it the one in the school that our job is related to?
It is the dual. So if you're for OPT, you want to list your home school for the approval. And if there's any special circumstance, we'll work with your schools in regards to that, but usually it's going to be your home school. And I just want to mention that there is someone who just asked a question 1146. That's probably going to be the last question we can take. So we'll try and get through the rest of these within the hour. I'll go ahead and the traveling after I receive my EAD but don't have a job, it's okay. The guidance basically says if you have a job, then you want to have the offer letter. But if you don't have the job yet, I always suggest carry proof of your job search. It's probably not going to be asked for, but it's not a bad idea to show that you're actively looking for something and plan to work on OPT, but it's not a regulatory requirement to have the actual job offer. All right.
Okay. I can try to take a crack at the next question if you want to ask.
Okay, go for it. All right. I don't want to accrue unemployment days if EAD takes longer to process and sent to me. Is there a recommended date I should file for EAD that this doesn't happen? I graduate in December.
So I think similar to add on kind of what you had mentioned earlier in terms of the timing of, sometimes the sooner is the better option. I think that answer also can apply to this one but also, again, I think keeping in mind the start date that you choose, and then trying as best you can to file in a timely manner. And then, as Donna had mentioned, there is, if necessary, the premium processing option. But I think this kind of is more related to what we had previously answered of kind of the earlier can be better. If you wanted to add to that, Donna.
No, it's just
okay.
Go ahead, apply sooner than later. Best way to try to avoid it. So what are the implications on OPT if we go part-time in the spring, final semester before graduation? So if it's your final semester and you're part-time, you're going to apply for a final semester reduced course load. Immigration-wise, you're technically still considered full-time in that scenario. It's not going to impact your OPT eligibility. Do you want me to read the next one?
I can take this one.
Go for it.
So it's asking, does the company have to be e-verified if I'm in the first year of OPT? I understand for STEM extension, I file only in the second year, right? So the first part to your question, the first year of OPT, which would be referring to post-completion OPT, it is not a requirement for the company to be e-verified. Now, if you are eligible beyond that first 12 months post-completion OPT, if your program that you graduated with is eligible for the STEM extension, then if you are going to be using that during the STEM extension period for OPT, that is a requirement that the company does need to be e-verified. And the earliest that you can, to kind of answer this second question, and I hope I'm understanding this correctly, the earliest that you can apply, if eligible, for the STEM extension is 90 days before your post-completion OPT is going to be ending. So the end date that's on currently on your post-completion EAD card. And then the latest that you can apply for it is, as I said before, how when an application needs to be submitted and receipted by USCIS, the application needs to be submitted and receipted to USCIS before the expiration date on your post-completion EAD card at that time. You will no longer be eligible to apply if you try to do so after your post-completion OPT has expired.
Thanks, Madison. For the next question, is it true when you file for STEM extension, it has to be a full-time job? It can no longer be a volunteer position or an internship. Any employment while you're on a STEM extension has to be with an E-Verify employer. It does have to be paid, and you do have to be working at least 20 hours a week and have that training plan. So as long as it's 20 hours or more and it's paid and it's E-Verify, then it's possible for STEM.
Can you talk about OPT for PhD students? For example, if I plan to defend in February, but my program still ends in May, right? When would be a good time to apply for OPT if I plan to start work in May? So as a PhD student, you do have the option, you have some options with that, and whether or not you want your OPT to possibly start based on your defense date versus waiting till traditionally when the program would end for your semester for Penn. If you do decide that, hey, I'm defending in February, because I just want to see if I can start OPT sooner, there is a document that we do have you and your department sign. It's called an affidavit of understanding. And it's pretty much you and your department confirming that you're aware that if you do choose to use your defense date as your end date and what you want to base it off of for applying for OPT, that from that date, things such as, your stipend and, Penn, like student benefits, things like that you would typically have, and that would typically end at the traditional kind of program end date, your graduation, those benefits would be ending sooner. Because essentially, if you're requesting that, when we're going to make your OPT recommended I-20, we are also actually shortening your program date. We are updating it to that defense date. So if you put that you are defending February 1 and you're wanting it to be, your OPT to apply based on that, then we would be changing it to that end date. And then I know that at other part, when would be a good time to apply if you were, I think it said if you were wanting to start working in May, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Dot. Oh,
I mean, it probably is good that you probably want to start that application, if you want to start working in May, you could keep that May date if you decide to, or use an earlier date, but try and do it about at that 90-day mark ahead of time. But I think especially for our PhD students, it's usually a good one-on-one discussion as well, just because it's nice that there's flexibility, but then it also gives you so many options that sometimes sitting down and talking to an advisor is going to help you sort through it.
So for the next one, and I can start with answering this, just to confirm, if the USCIS OPT application has been received, but it's not yet approved, can we still travel? It's my understanding it's not recommended to do so. It's not the ideal situation. If there is like something going on where travel is necessary, you want to discuss that further, you can with your assigned ISSS advisor. But it's not the ideal situation. And I don't know, John, if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not prohibited, but it's just it's you're taking on potential risks if you've graduated and your EAD is still pending and you're traveling. It's just something that you want to consider, but it's not that you're not allowed to.
This next question you may want to take, Donna. I can
Okay,
ask
yeah.
it, but I have not yet personally had to withdraw or assist with that process.
It is something, and with the online portal, it does give you some, additional options to go in and withdraw. I mean, it does happen, but it has to be done before it's approved. And it's just making sure that everything aligns. The USCIS makes the update within a timely manner before they actually approve it. And you're also going to want to make sure that it gets updated within the system. So it's one of those things where they don't have the clearest mechanism to withdraw an application. But we can definitely work with you if you decide you want to do that. I just would try not to get to the point where it happens, but it happens in situations where you do need to do the withdrawal. But once it's approved, you're not going to have that OPT at a second master's level if you're a master's now. So you definitely want to try if it gets to that situation.
Okay, the next question is, am I wrong in understanding that processing early is safer in terms of ensuring that you're able to freely travel in case of approval, or rather you're running a risk applying late because that makes travel more unsafe, uncertain?
It's really that the earlier you apply, the more likely you're having EAD before you need to travel, is what it comes down to. So you might as well get it in, and then hopefully it's something you get it and you don't have to worry about it, and you do your trip.
Okay. When is the last day I can put on my application ID I graduate, if I graduate in the fall semester? So if you're referring to the last day in terms of, I would assume, Donna, like start date that you can put?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and that would be, I think,
19.
yeah, it's the end of the 6-year grace period. So February 19th for December 21st graduation. That is the latest date you can put. So the earliest date is the day after your program end date, which is December 22nd. And then the latest is February 19th. So any date in between that range for a start date is acceptable. Okay.
And this kind of like is the reverse of that.
Yeah. Yeah, the latest end date USCIS will issue is 14 months from the end of your program. Does this mean the latest end date on OPT for December grads will be February 18, 2024? Correct. If you choose, February 19th to be your start date, yes, February 18th would be the end date a year from them. Because like I said, the end dates are, it doesn't go, from 19 to 19th. It's usually a year from that start date you choose, and then subtract a day. That is how USCIS recognizes 12 months.
And we don't know yet the average processing time because students just started applying just about 3 weeks ago. So we don't know yet.
Already 3 weeks.
So unfortunately, I'm hoping it goes sooner, but we saw things go really fast at the beginning of fall. Then they slowed down a lot once premium became an option, and we don't know. So ask me that in a couple months, and I should be able to give you a better answer.
And we do update. I know I was talking to our IT about this. We do update whenever we send out an OPTI 20. Like if you've applied and then we issue it to you. I know in that email when you're sent it, we do provide detailed instructions on kind of what to do next for your application. And within that, we do include what we're seeing for average processing times. And I know we do try to update that. I know for right now, because it is based off of, as Donna mentioned, kind of spring going into the summer. I know right now it's saying, 3 to 4 months regular processing. But again, that is just what we were seeing at the beginning of this year. We are still experiencing fall processing.
Yeah. I think the next question, we actually already answered that a couple of questions ago in regards to the AAD. And as I mentioned before, we were going to have to cut it off after that question. So if you still have remaining questions, please look at our advising calendar. We have walk-ins just about daily that you could always do a virtual walk-in hour, email your assigned advisor. And I'd just like to say thanks for your time today, and we wish you luck. Thank you to Madison for being my co-host.
Yeah, and likewise, thank you, Donna, and thank you everybody for taking the time to attend as well. And yeah, as Donna's mentioned, if any questions at all, please free to use all the mentioned avenues that Donna mentioned to contact us.
All right. Hope everyone has a great day. Enjoy the fall weather.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye.